Hello friends, my name is Ajay, one of your TAs for Comp 423, and welcome to the third video in the Introduction to Angular series. In this video, I'm going to be diving a little bit more deeply into the concept of routing. I'm going to show a practical example of how to create a new component and to get it hooked up so that when you go to a given URL, it's able to show the page. And I'm also going to be talking about how we can pass data from a URL into a component. These questions have come up a lot in office hours, and so I think that this will hopefully be helpful for you. So on the screen here, I have the Excel code base open. As you can see, this is the state of the code base as you all got it for EXO1. And we have all of these folders. We have backend, docs, and front end. Of course, for the purposes of EXO1, we are really focused on the front end folder and the Angular project that is inside of here, right? So what I want to do is I want to create a new component. I'm going to call this component the demo component, and I want to get it hooked up so that I can go to my browser, go to that localhost 1560, and I want that component to show up when I do /demo. Right? Now, getting a component set up with routing in this most basic way has already been covered in exercise 1, but I want to again show an example here practically and to kind of tie it back together and then also to extend that with some more functionality. Okay? So in order to create a component, you probably remember from EX00 the ng generate component command, right? And so in order for me to create a component though, you'll notice that in my terminal, I'm at the /workspace level in my directory. And /workspace is all the way at this root level. And remember that our Angular project is located in the front end folder. So if we want to create a new component, we first need to cd or change our directory or open the folder of our Angular project. And so we can again use the cd command here to do that. And I can say cd front end. And that will change my working directory in my terminal to the front end folder. And now from here, I can run the ng generate component command. So I can type ng generate component, and I want to name this component demo. So I'm going to type in demo. Now you'll notice when I press enter here that there should be an error that shows up, and it says that more than one modules match. And this is a feature of the code base that we have and is something that we'll be talking about a lot more in depth later. So you do not really have to understand how modules work right now. But basically, the module that our code is going to be contained in for EXO1 is going to be in the standard app module. And app module you can see is a file down here. And if I open it, you'll notice that there's a lot of import statements. And there's also this declarations list. Inside of this, at ng module decorator, you can see this is a very large decorator that goes all the way down, all for this empty class, right? So, there's a lot of stuff in here, and we don't really have to know how all of this works for now. But basically, the declarations, anything inside of this list means that it is part of the module. And a module is just a bundle of code. It's a bundle of related features. Right? And anything within the same module can access each other and you don't have to import anything. And so that's one of the main reasons why we use modules. Now, typically on smaller Angular projects, as you probably saw in EX00, you only have one of these. You just have app module. Because our code base is so large, we have kind of compartmentalized certain features to have their own modules. Again, that's something that we'll be talking about later, but it might be good to begin thinking about now as you explore the code base and you start seeing all of these different modules and all of that. But basically what this means is that we need to be a little bit more specific in our ng generate component command, because the ng generate component command is creating a component, but it needs to know which module to add it to. Right? And for this particular exercise, we're just going to use the app module, the standard one that is at the root level of our project. So I can type ng generate component demo, and I can add the module flag here, and I can say that this is going to be equal to app. And if I run this, you will see now automatically I'm in my app module folder. You see the demo component has been added. So now demo component is part of the module. The ng generate command did this for us. In addition, you'll also see that in the source and app directory here, we now have a new folder called demo. And if I open this dropdown, you will see the files that are associated with our component. We have a CSS file, an HTML file with a very simple paragraph, demo works, and then our TypeScript file. And those are the only 3 files that we really need. This spec file is also generated by Angular when we run ngGenerate, but we don't need it. So I'm going to delete it for now, just so that it's a little bit more simple. We just have the 3 files that we're used to, okay? So now what I want to do is I want to run my site. And remember that we use the honcho start command to get our site up and running. However, the honcho start command actually does not work at just the front end level. We have to go all the way back to our workspace directory. And the reason is because when we are running our app, we want to run both the back end and the front end. If we don't run both what's in this backend folder and the front end folder, we won't be able to, the site will just not work. And we'll be going over, the backend in the future weeks. But for now, that contains how our login works, how all of our site works. So we need to have that running too. So I can type cd with 2 dots, and that will bring me back to my workspace directory. The 2 dots means that I'm like moving up the level. So the first dot is my current folder, second dot is the folder above. That's why there's 2 dots. I'm going to clear my console to make this a little bit easier, and now I'm going to run honcho start. Right? And you'll see that this is going to begin to build and generate. And once we get the command, or once we get the line in our terminal that says that it's compiled successfully, we should be able to see our site in the browser. All right, so now compiled successfully showed up. I can go to Safari and I can refresh my page here, and you'll see that now I'm logged in and this is the CSXL site. Now, what you'll notice here is, I can move around between all my pages. I can go to this events and organizations page. But if I try to go into my route, my URL here and type demo and press enter, you'll see nothing shows up. I can go even further by right-clicking and pressing this inspect element. And this allows you to see basically any errors that are happening in your on your site. And this is in Safari, I right-click and press inspect element. In Chrome, I think it might be just inspect or developer tools. But all of the standard browsers have this feature, and we'll be talking about this in the future. But you'll see that there's an error that shows up here that says cannot match any routes, right? And basically what this is saying is, well, I typed in a route demo, and my app routing module is going to take this URL that the user types in, and it's going to look what component do I show for this particular URL. If you recall, this is the front-end diagram that we ended up building throughout part 1 and part 2 of the Angular video series so far. And what you'll notice is that, again, we have the user up here, and the user provides a URL into what is known as the app routing module. And we covered this in part 1 if you're interested in getting a bit of a recap. But based off of the URL that the user provides, the app routing module then shows the correct component, right? And so if I type in, for example, /demo, I'd want my Angular app routing module to actually show my demo component. However, how does the app routing module know which component to show for which route? Well, that is the job of the component actually to provide this data to the router. And you can see that in my diagram, there's an arrow going from my component, which is over here, back over to the app routing module. And you'll see that this diagram says that the component exposes a static route property to the router, describing the URL that the component should be available at. All right, back in our actual repository, or back into our workspace here, I want to show an example which I think will kind of illustrate how the component has the static route property and how it goes and connects to our router. So the about component, which is right here, is perhaps one of the most simplest components on the site. It doesn't contain, as you can see, any code. It's just some base HTML. But you'll notice that the one thing that this class does have is a public static route property. And this route contains 2 items. It contains a path, and then it contains the component that is supposed to be shown at that path. And you can see that I have put about as my path, meaning that, after the prefix of my URL, when I have that first slash, I want the page to show up when I type about. And the page I want to actually show up here is the about component. And now if I go down to my app routing module file, you'll see that I have this list of routes, right here. And this list of routes is, basically this contains all of the routes that the router is going to work with. And so I passed in this about component.route, the static route that was located on over here. So right here, I added this into my app routing routes list. And so therefore, now the about page will show up whenever I go to the about path. So in my demo component, if I want to have my demo component show up at the route/demo, what I need to do is I need to follow this exact same format. So I need a public static route property, which contains a path and it contains a component. I'm going to copy this here and I'm going to move it over to my demo component. And the path that we want to show our component in is going to be this demo. And then finally, I want the demo component to show up, right? Now I'm going to save, and you'll see that when I save, my site should, recompile, which it did. And if I go back to Safari and I go and type in demo here, you should see that again, it still did not work, right? We still do not have our page showing up here. And again, that is because it is very important. Even though we have created the static route property, we need to actually add it to our list of routes in the app routing module. You'll see that if I were to type here demo component.route and I add this object, which I defined here, to my list of routes, and then I save, and I go back to my page here, if I were to redirect to demo, you will now see that the demo works paragraph shows up and my demo component is working. All right, now I want you to think a little bit about what other functionality might we need here. And I think the best example is going to be on the organizations page. So I'm going to go over to organizations and you'll see that my route when I go here is /organizations. But now what happens when I click on any of these, right? So let's say I press on CS Social Good. You will see that now my route has organizations/CSSG. If I were to go to any of the other ones, like let's say I go to the Game Development Club, you will see that my route is organizations/GameDev. If I were to go to another one, let's say I jump over to Hack and See, you will see that we have organizations/Hack and See. Now, we're not creating pages. Like we're not recreating pages for every single organization. If you look at the VS Code project, and I go to this about folder, sorry, not about folder, the organization folder, right? Organization page is the component which is showing all of our, it's basically this right here. This page with all these tiles is the organization page. And then we have a filter, which is basically just some extra code that allows the search bar to work. We have the editor, which allows us to edit organizations. And then finally, we have the details page. And what you'll notice is that we don't have dozens of pages for all the organizations. And that is because we can be a bit smart and we can use our route to pass data from one component to another, or basically just pass data into any component. And so we can still have one component that represents the page for details about an organization, but we can create a parameter in our route that we can then pass data to, and then we can use that data somewhere in our component. So for the sake of this, what I want to do is I want to create a parameter on my demo route so that I can basically put any number here, like I can put 1, and it should show 1 on the screen. Right? So how do I get the data from my route onto my component? There is a very handy tool that Angular allows us to use called activated route. And so what I can do is I can go over to my TypeScript file, and you'll notice that my class currently doesn't have a component, doesn't have a constructor. But what I want to do is I want to add a constructor here, and we'll make this constructor blank for now. However, we want to inject. So this is using dependency injection, similar to how we add services to our components. We want to inject what is known as the activated route. And what I can do here is I can type like, private route, activated route. And you'll see as I'm typing, you see this is activated route. It says, in the Angular module and this router here. And there's also all this information. And as you're working through any new project, especially as you're working through these exercises, reading these tooltips and documentation is really, really helpful, right? So you can see here it says, provides access to information about a route associated with a component that is loaded in the outlet, right? This is a bit more, maybe verbose than what most of us are used to reading, but it's basically saying that it provides information about the route that we use, right? So I can press activated route here, and now I have this route object injected into my component the same way that I use, a service where I'd say, private, let's say demo service, and make that the demo service type. And as long as it has that add injectable decorator, it's available to this component. All of that was in the previous video. Now what I can do is I have access to this route object, and I can do things with this route object. So I can say route dot, and you'll see that we have all of these different different items here. But what we can do is we can take a snapshot of the current route. And if I highlight over, you can see that now this tooltip isn't too descriptive. It just says the current snapshot of this route, but it's a moment in time, when our page loads, what the route looks like. I can press this, and now inside of here, I have all of these different, properties. And what I want to do is I want to access what is known as a route parameter. And so I can say route.params, and this provides all of the parameters that we pass in. Now, how do we even pass in a parameter into our path? Well, this is the route object that we created. In order for us to pass in a parameter, we can think about this like parameters to a function. We need to have some sort of input that we can use, and we give it a name. We can do that in our route here by adding a slash, and then the name of our parameter follows a colon. So if I want to create I just want to create a parameter called num, N-U-M, I would say colon num. And this allows Angular to differentiate that this is an actual, we're expecting some value to go here. We're not, expecting the NUM, those characters to be there. So I'm not trying to type demo/num, explicitly. I'm trying to have demo/ and then some input. And the input here, or the parameter, I will provide right after the slash. And now, with this activated route, I can now access this parameter by indexing my params object with the name of my parameter. So since my parameter here is named num, I can use the square brackets to index, and I can type num here, and this will allow me to access this particular value that I pass in. And so what I can do is I can say let, I'll just call this num equals, and let's just say that I want to load, or I want to log this number to the console when my page loads. I can save, go back over here. I will open my console so that you can see it, and I'm going to clear it. So I'm going to navigate to demo, and then I'm going to navigate to 1 again, right? And you'll see that there's a warning, there's an error here, but that's unrelated, don't worry. It says there are unread messages. I can clear the filter, and you'll see that 1 was outputted to my console. If I were to change this to, let's say, 3, you'll see that 3 prints out. So this allows me to take a value from my URL and access it from within my component. Now, you might be asking, why is this useful? And specifically maybe relevant to word exercise 0. Well, in exercise 0, in the current state of it at least, you are trying to create a Pomodoro timer feature. And you have a list of Pomodoro timers. However, sometimes, I think it's either story B or C, you need to edit that timer. Let's say that I want to change the time of a timer or change its name. Well, I have an editor maybe, like I create some sort of component that allows me to edit my Pomodoro timer, but which timer do I want to edit, right? That's a question, like how do I know which editor editor I'm trying to open, like which timer am I trying to edit. Well, this might be a very useful technique to be able to identify which object, for example, which timer you're trying to edit in your data, the data in your service. You can pass in some data in through the URL. So let's say that I have a listing for a timer and I want to edit that timer. When I press that button, I can say what route I want to navigate to, and that might be a way that I can pass data from there into that component. And overall, this is used in many places throughout the site, and you can explore this. This is used in organizations, so I can go to the organizations page and open an organization, and it navigates to it. Same thing with events. I can jump to these events. Now, in this example, because I'm on the full screen, it's just showing up on the right-hand side. So, that doesn't really matter, but I can, access any of these things. And most of these pages, there are a lot of pages throughout here. And there's also even more pages than what's just shown here, because this is not the admin view. There are a lot of pages that utilize this feature. So I highly recommend checking it out. All right, and lastly, before I end this video, I want to jump back to the diagram that we were working with, because what we just did with this parameter being, passed in through this activated route, that's not something that's necessarily been, that's not really part of this diagram. So where would that fit in, right? Well, the user provides a URL, so that we know, right? The user provides a URL here. And the URL that it provides can have a parameter in it. So in my example, I used, this is /demo and then /1. That is the URL that's being supplied to my router. And the router then, sets this activated route to have this parameter in it. Right? And so I can use that param list. I would say like route.snapshot.params, and the params that in the code I had, I'll write it again, route.snapshot.params, right? This params here is just an object which stores a key value pair, the key being the name of the input that I specified, or the name of the parameter. So you saw that in my routing, like in that static route property, I said that this was demo / and then num, like that. So when I supply this as my route, this params has this num right here, and then it links it to the number that the user typed in. So if the user provided a 1, then 1 would go into this params list, and that is the way that we can access data from a URL in a component. And it's accessible through this, where the URL, the user navigates their URL, it's provided to the app routing module, and then as the component is loaded here along this arrow, we have that route passed through, and that route would be this here with the snapshot and the params. I hope that this video was a little bit helpful in terms of seeing how we connect a component to our overall project using the router, as well as maybe helping you to become more familiar with how we can pass data from the URL that the user provides into our component, and how that might be useful in working with both this project as well as many other features that you will be working on in the future. If you have any questions, definitely come to office hours or leave a comment below and we will try to answer it there. If you like the video, feel free to like on YouTube, and see you all in the next one.